Your brain is always trying to solve a problem. And when you tell it, I'll never be able to afford that, you basically have removed the goal. There's no goal now. You've already told your brain, hey, you can go back to sleep. We got no goals. We have no aspirations. We'll never be able to afford that. So I don't need you to try to solve that for me. I don't need you to try to figure this out for me. Welcome back to the 365 Driven Podcast. Today we're going to do a solo episode together, and I'm going to talk about a very important subject, something that you may have identified or may have not identified in your life that's really holding you back. That's right. We're going to talk about self-limiting beliefs and also just the limited beliefs that you may be carrying that you don't have the awareness of. And then we're going to talk about how to get past those so you can free your life. Understand that this topic is relative to every financial level. I've experienced it when I was broke, experienced it after I made millions of dollars, and I just didn't start really gaining awareness of this to really my mid-30s at age. So I just want you to understand in the context of this discussion that we're going to have, it applies to you whatever financial level you are. So I don't want you to think that this episode is just going to be for people that are maybe not there financially, they're struggling financially. And if you're making a certain amount, maybe you're free from this. It doesn't happen. It exists at all levels. I verified this also with many of my clients that are very successful themselves and a lot of my friends and colleagues that are also very successful. And so it literally exists at every level. So it's all relative. Just kind of keep that in mind, all right? This is not something you're going to outgrow, but after today, maybe I'll have some awareness of it and you'll get past it a lot quicker. So first of all, let me give you some examples of limiting beliefs that I used to carry. I'm going to go through a bunch of these. I have them on notes here that I used to have, and maybe you'll hear some of these and maybe you'll relate to those, or maybe you're stuck in those right now. First of all, let's go back to restaurants. I'm going to start at the bottom of the dollar ladder here. Restaurants, whether that's drive-through or going to restaurants. Guys, when I was in college and I was really broke and I was stressed out and I didn't have a lot of money and I was waiting tables and working construction to be able to pay for college, I would eat 99-cent double cheeseburgers. There was a McDonald's on campus, and that's literally what I would eat. I would just eat this garbage food, 99-cent double cheeseburgers. And I remember even at that time looking at something like the premium burgers from McDonald's, if you can even believe what that is. Like, something like the quarter pounder with cheese. Like, that was too expensive. I think back then it was like $2 or $3. And I just remember looking at the menu and just kind of going straight to the cheapest sections. And back then, I also remember that Taco Bell used to have like the 99-cent menu. I don't know if either of these restaurants still do these specials, but I don't eat at those either. So I just remember menu shopping at one of the cheapest restaurants that exists and thinking that was okay. And I get it that was all I could afford, but I also felt at that time that was all I really could have. Like that was it. Like I never really wanted to splurge and get the extra burger and things like that. So this also translates to restaurants. Many of you guys, I know this is a very common one, especially. Many of you go to restaurants, and how many of you, let's be honest here, how many of you actually, instead of looking at the list of the things that you would like to eat, you start running your finger down the column where the prices are listed, and then when you start to getting into the price section that feels a little bit more comfortable to you, you start then kind of narrowing your choices down to what's in that section of the things that you feel comfortable spending. So, I remember even back then going to somewhere like Outback Steakhouse. Outback Steakhouse was a very mid-tier restaurant. It's not a high-end restaurant, but guys, the way I grew up, think about this. Red Lobster was kind of fancy. That's how I grew up. Red Lobster was like you had to have some kind of a special occasion. This is like a really low level restaurant I wouldn't even eat at nowadays. But in the world that I grew up with, the beliefs that I carried, things had to be special. Like Red Lobster was date night or something back then in high school, college range. So how many of you are going through that menu and you're looking at the prices first and then kind of scanning over to see the ranges of the things you can afford? That's an awareness moment. I'm trying to teach you these kind of things. Pay attention to those. So also, even when you go to the grocery store, how many of you are going to the grocery store, you're buying what you need, and I'm all for getting value and trying to get the best bang for the buck if the value and the quality is equal, but a lot of times you'll see the name brand of the thing that you really want to buy, but then you'll look to the shelf next to it and you'll pick the no-name brand or the knockoff brand that's kind of the copy of the one that you want to buy because it's a few cents less. How many are you doing that? And you've been burned many times before. You buy these no-name brands and they're just not as good. They just don't taste as good. There's something just off about them, the texture, whatever. The smell is different. And you're like, I should have bought the brand name. It was only a few cents more. A few cents, guys. A few cents, right? We spend a lot of our lives tripping over dollars to go focus on picking up a few pennies. Think about how much more rewarding your life would be if you just bought the thing that you want, knowing that you can afford it. I'm not saying that go buy things that you can't afford. Use that entire thing for the entire episode here. You're like, if you know you can afford it, why aren't you buying the thing that you want? We're going to get into these kind of things. Clothing. This is a good one. So clothing, I had some real hangups when it came to clothing. To give you an idea of what I grew up with, my mom made our clothes, my sister and I, she made our clothes. We would go to the fabric store when we were kids and we'd buy patterns and we'd buy clothes because we couldn't afford nice clothes because we just didn't have the money. And so my mom made our clothes up until probably midway through junior high, when other kids start paying attention to the labels and the brands, and it becomes like cool to wear the Nike logo or the Polo logo or things like that. And it sucks when you're the kid that has the homemade clothes. And guys, my mom made really nice clothes. Like, she was a seamstress and she enjoyed doing that. So she had a skill set that she was able to make us clothes, but it's just not cool when your mom makes your clothes, right? And so I had this real hang up about spending money on clothing for a very long time. And to give you an example of that, maybe you have some of these barriers yourself, right? For a very long time, I would not spend more than $50 on a pair of jeans or a shirt. To me, if it was over $50, like, wow, that's just crazy. Like, I'll never spend over $50 for a shirt. That's ridiculous. A pair of jeans, man, I'm looking for them to be on sale at the end of the season. And, if I could get a pair of Levi's for $29, like, those are the ones I would buy when they're regularly priced over $50. If they go on sale, I'll buy them when they're on sale. And again, I'm okay with you guys doing that with value. Like, it's okay to buy things that are on sale that you want anyways, but what are you settling for, right? Why did this fictitious number of $50 a shirt just kind of stay in my head for decades of my life? This was even something I realized even after making a lot of money, that I would still go to the store and I would look at things and I go, oh man, that shirt's $75. No way. Even if it was a shirt I really would have loved to have. Like, if I would have, man, that shirt looks great. It's the right color. It fits right. But I just not going to spend $75 on a shirt, right? So this is actually a perspective I gained when I was working in Europe. I noticed that a lot of the people in France and London, they would dress nicer on average than the people in the United States. And I just started to pay attention to that kind of thing. And I started to realize, why do they always dress so nice here? I mean, they're making less money, literally. I know that they're making a lot less money. They're paying into socialism. They have higher taxes and things like that, but they can afford nicer clothes. And one day I asked one of the people I was working with, like, why do you guys all dress so nice here? And he had a weird answer, and I didn't expect this. He said, well, here in Paris, apartments are very expensive, and they're very small. So we get a very small apartment with a very small closet. And so we can't have a lot of clothes. So instead of buying a bunch of crappy quality clothes like you Americans buy, we only buy nice clothes because we can only have so few clothes that we can use. So they might buy 10 total outfits, where Americans, you guys go open your drawers and we got these bins and we're storing things under the bed and we got closets stacked among stacks, and we're just buying a quantity instead of quality. So they focused on quality instead of quantity. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So you guys will buy better quality stuff because there's less of it and you're spending about the same amount, but you look better, you feel better. And when you feel better and you look better, you're going to perform better and you're going to be better overall. So that was a gain of perspective that I learned from some Europeans, and that was very universal over there. So that's just one example. So maybe shoes, maybe that's the thing that you're not spending on. You ladies, men out there. For me, the number that I've really struggled with crossing for a very long time in my life is spending more than $100 on shoes. You see, I was willing to spend a little bit more on shoes because they last longer and you can wear them every day and you get more use out of them, because I was looking like, a shirt you might wear once every week if it's your favorite shirt, or once every month if it's a dress shirt. So I kind of justified not spending that on a shirt. But a shoes, I could spend $100, right? Whatever that number was, why was it still stuck in my mind? I mean, I remember even as a kid, like, some of the high-end shoes were all over $100 a pair. So why was that number stuck in my mind? And that's the kind of things you're starting to awareness. I guarantee you're listening to this and you have some number stuck in your mind, like you will not spend more than this, unless it's just got to be some fantastic, super duper thing that I just have to have these and they cost much. And, you guys that are collecting shoes, yeah, you guys can bow out of this one because I know you guys go spend a fortune on shoes that you'll never even wear. And I get that because we all have things that we collect or we can justify. But I'm talking about the shoes you would wear on your feet on a daily basis, maybe the boots or things like that. Like there's some kind of limit that you're spending on. Again, me growing up without money, we couldn't even afford Nikes. When they were on sales, they were still expensive for us. I always had the no-name knockoff brands when I was a kid. And I carried that kind of belief system into my adulthood. You see how kind of this is where it's coming from, where it's stemming from? So maybe it's the hotels example. Maybe you're traveling, you're going on a trip, and you're looking at hotels, and there's some number, isn't there? There's some number. You're hung up on some number that, man, I will not spend more than X amount per night. What is that number right now? What's the number that pops in your head? For me, a long time, it was $150 a night. And, I used to think that Hiltons and Marriotts were for rich people. And really, they're not. They're not that fancy. That's usually what we stay at nowadays when we travel is Hiltons and Marriotts. But when I was in the Motel 6 land and understanding that $150, I was always thinking about it from a dollar exchange that I was working at the time. So putting it in perspective and context, if you're a waiter and you're waiting tables and you work 6 hours in a shift and you make $150, when I would look at a hotel that was $150, like, man, I had to work 6 hours to be able to pay for that. So that's just way too expensive. I can't imagine working 6 hours to pay for one night to sleep in and take a shower, right? So you do this mental bargaining with yourself and you start to justify, that's X amount of hours or X amount of my week's salary to be able to buy that. That's a limited belief that we carry, right? Because we don't think that we deserve it. We don't think that we've earned that. So why would I spend that? And I get it. It's something that you may have had developed in the past when you think about your hourly jobs, your earliest career jobs. But maybe you're well beyond that now. Maybe you're earning way more than that, but you're still holding on to these old beliefs. It's crazy, isn't it? You're probably still holding some of these beliefs. Let's get into gadgets. I mean, we all like new phones or whatever. You're an Android or an iPhone. They just announced the new iPhone and people are like, oh man, I'm going to go buy the iPhone 15. Change the plug on it, and just all these things that they do to sell things. Or maybe you're the guy that goes to the computer store and you need a new computer and you know that you make a lot of money on your computer and it's a very important piece of hardware for your business. But then you're looking at it and you go, man, I would really like to have that MacBook. I'd really like to have that gaming PC. Like they're so amazing, but man, I just don't want to spend more than $1,000 on a computer. I just can't do it. Even if you can afford it, I'm saying if you can literally afford that, and you know that you make plenty of money from that device, there's some silly barrier that we will not spend more because it just feels weird to us. Like, I can't spend more than $1,000. And I'm going to wait till Black Friday and see if everything's on sale. And maybe that thing that I want will, eventually get on sale. And yeah, you might get it. You might get the model that's 3 years old, that's almost obsolete, that has been passed by in technology because you can finally afford the 3-year-old model. And that's okay, again, if it goes back to the value of what your needs are. But I'm really focused on why you create these limiting beliefs on what you think you can afford, even if you could afford it. This is something that I realized in my entire life. I was kind of going through this kind of stuff. Now, even cars, you guys know that I'm a car fanatic and I love cars. Here's something that I started to realize, again, in my 30s. Isn't it weird, those of you that enjoy cars, or insert whatever your expensive thing is that you would like to buy, right? Isn't it weird that you kind of dream or daydream about the things that you can only afford? And let me give you some more details here. So when I was in high school, I was driving an old Camaro that I restored, and it was a rust bucket that we restored, my dad and I, and at the time, this is in the late 80s, early 90s. Everybody had big booming systems in their cars, and they had 18-inch woofers and walls of woofers and things like that. And that was the thing. What we were into is car audio. And I wasn't really bitten by the speed bug by then because I didn't have a fast car and I couldn't afford a fast car. So I liked stereo systems back then. And man, my Camaro could only handle a couple of 15s in the trunk. And I wasn't going to build a wall in a Camaro. That'd be kind of silly because I still had the back seat I liked. And I started looking at all these mini trucks back then, the Nissans and the Mazdas and the little Ford Rangers. Like at the time, it was very trendy for people to buy these mini trucks and lower them and put snug top campers on them and build walls of woofers and have amplifiers, racked out in the back. And so I would daydream about buying one of those mini trucks. I almost traded my 69 Camaro back then for a mini truck, a friend of mine. And luckily my dad was like, no, you're not doing that. And so I would only spend a lot of time looking at these mini trucks, which were really the least expensive new vehicles you could buy. Think about that. It's the least expensive new vehicles you could buy as little Japanese trucks back then, and Ford Rangers. But that's all I would spend time on, reading magazines about those and, doing those kind of things with that scene, right? And this kind of escalates as you start to earn more. And then it became, okay, I'm almost 25. My insurance is going to cut in half. I want to get a sports car. And I remember back then, Mustang GTs were cool. And I wanted a Mustang GT, and it had to be a manual. And I was spending, this was like 1995 era, 96. I was spending a lot of time on the internet forums like corral.net and researching Mustang GTs and what options and this, and still couldn't afford a new one, but I was looking at the used ones because some of them were a year or 2 years old, and I can go buy one of these things. And I just remember not really looking at anything beyond what I could afford. Like I was spending hours and hours and hours researching things that I could afford, which is kind of showing you that our dreams don't really extend past things that we think we can afford. And it's really weird because if you have really big dreams, if you have really big goals, why are you limiting yourself to the things that you can only afford today? It doesn't make much sense. Now, I get it, you should do the research to do things and buy the things that you want, but why do we limit ourselves so much, right? And eventually, the Mustang GT fell away to the WS6 Trans Ams, and those were a little bit more expensive, and that kind of went on for a few years, and I started LS1 Tech, business behind those things, and the Camaros, and eventually that led to Corvettes. It's like, man, back then the new Corvettes were in the mid 40,000s. I was like, man, I think I can afford one of those. So I started to spend more time looking at Corvettes, and I ended up buying a C6 Z06, ordered it from a dealership in Detroit, and had that delivered to town in 2009. And eventually that became Cadillac CTSVs. Those were about 65,000. See how these kind of little increments kind of step up. But the thing is while I was doing all this, going from mini trucks to Camaros, the Trans Ams, the Mustangs, all these things, I wasn't looking at the Dodge Vipers, and I wasn't looking at the Ferraris, and I wasn't looking at the Porsches, and I wasn't looking at the Lamborghinis. Cars I knew of, I had awareness of. I really enjoyed looking at those cars, and I would drool over them at the car show, but I was spending way too much time focusing on what I could afford today, and that's a limiting belief. It's like, man, that's all I can afford. I'm just going to go all in on this thing, and some of my friends are still dealing with the Camaros and the Mustangs, and we've been doing this for 20 years. It's like, man, I want you to have a higher earning potential. I want you to learn from this limiting beliefs that you do deserve more. You can and have the potential to earn more to get whatever you want. So why do we keep these limiting beliefs that just keep us very comfortable? And I'll give you some more examples. These are kind of fun. I'm enjoying these because I really deconstructed a lot of these goals and the things that have been really bothering me in the last 20 years of doing this. And so another one would be vacations. Man, this one's a tough one. Vacations. I grew up without taking a lot of vacations. My family, we did one road trip every summer. That's really all we could afford. And I grew up thinking that airplanes and plane tickets were for rich people. I mean, that's literally what my parents would tell me. It's like, we can't afford a flight. Like, what do you think? We're rich? Airplanes were expensive. They're too expensive. It's a waste of money, I would hear. My dad would be like, oh, airplane tickets are a waste of money. And so when we grow up hearing those kind of things, we adopt those beliefs because we're being told those things from people that we love, we trust, and then you start to believe that airplane tickets are a waste of money, and going to Europe on vacation, oh my gosh, that's a huge waste of money. It's like many of you are probably listening to this or watching this, and you're like, damn it, that's me. Like, I think that vacations are a waste of money because I could better use that money to buy something, and then I would own it, and then I would have it, and I could use it over and over and over. But a vacation, like, it just lasts a week, 2 weeks, and it's gone, and it's out of there. That's where you're wrong. Consider this your self-awareness moment. Because yes, a vacation is something that is intangible. You don't get to hold it and keep it forever, but you do get to keep that memory, and you do get to keep that experience. And you do get to keep the perspectives that you gain by traveling the world and seeing how other people do things and knowing that we don't always have it right in whatever country you're listening to this from. Some countries do things better than you. Some countries do things worse than you, but the perspective is still valuable. And when you get to go see things in historic value and understanding the things that people were doing thousands of years ago that led to you today, it's very intriguing to understand the history of mankind and witnessing how it evolved and improved, and understanding really one of the cool things about looking back in history or reading very old history books like Marcus Aurelius Meditations, the guy that ran the Roman Empire. People had the same problems thousands of years ago. So you may be going through some challenges right now. You may be dealing with people at work or relationships, your kids. People have the same problems for thousands of years. There is no unique problem anymore. You may think that you're the only one in an isolated case, and why does this always happen to me? But guys, the problems when you read these old history books and you go visit these historical sites and you see all the stories behind them, it's the same problems that people are having today were the same problems they had thousands of years ago. So that should actually reassure you well, this has been solved many times, and it has. So vacations are not a waste of money. And this is something that my wife, Lisa, had to teach me because she grew up in a household where her dad worked for the airlines and their family could fly whenever they want on those buddy passes. They'd just stand by flights and they would fly all the time, and she got to fly all the time. So it was normal to her. And it wasn't about money, but she understood that traveling around the country and traveling the world was kind of like a normal thing. And, she brought that into our marriage, and I resisted it for a while, even when we hadn't afforded it, guys. I was making a lot of money, and I would still resist the spending money on airplanes, and I would still resist spending money on hotels and air quotes, wasting money on these trips. So if that's you and you're still thinking that kind of thing, you got to get past that. And the only way to get past that is by actually spending some of that money and going and see for yourself. Go try it out. And you might find that you like it once you kind of get past that resistance phase, right? Now, I love traveling now. We go on vacations basically every 2 or 3 months now. We travel the world. I've been to many, many, many different countries and seen different things and stayed months in different places. So I don't really worry about so much the material goods now. I have all the fancy stuff, but you know what I do? I really value the memories, and I really value the experience and hanging out with the right people at those different locations more than buying things. It's a greater value that when we think about our lives and we look back, let's say we make it to our deathbeds and we're ripe old age, we're not going to look back and have the biggest emotional memories about things we bought, because you just literally heard me. If I would have bought a mini truck and then I got the Mustang GT and then the Trans Am and then the Corvette and the Dodge Viper, I kind of keep getting improvements there, then it doesn't matter, because you felt like something I got something, and then 2 years later it was old and man, that was okay. This is better. It's always something better, right? But if I look back on all the trips and all the vacations and all the things and experience that I've done, I feel the strongest emotions around the time I got to spend and the things I got to see and witness way more valuable than the things I bought. So that's something that you'll learn as you start to travel and experience more of those things. So finally, I guess the other one that stands out to me is education. And education comes in the form of whatever you're learning. So if you're going to college or trade school or doing some group coaching programs or attending events or hiring a coach like myself, man, I had a lot of heartache about spending that money, but it's very valuable. If you're learning a new skill, then why wouldn't you invest maximum amounts to learning new skills that could help you create more income for yourself, create more revenue, create more earning potential so you could actually afford nicer things that you would like to have someday. So I was always just not wanting to invest in myself, and nowadays I'll spend $100,000 a year investing in programs and coaches and mentors. And even then, up till probably 2018, that was painful to talk about. It's man, how am I going to spend $100,000 in 1 year? That's ridiculous, right? Even if you could afford it, I would just think that's more than my college cost. I put myself through college as a welder, as a pipe fitter, and $100,000 in 1 year cost more than I spent on my entire college. And that limiting mindset it kept me stuck for a long time, because Once I started to make those kind of investments, I started to learn and get results at a lot faster pace and have earned 10 times the amount of money that I've spent on coaches and programs and those kind of courses. So think about that. If you're amplifying your skill or your knowledge to earn more, then you should invest more. And if you're investing the cheapest level and finding the cheapest thing that you can find, you're probably going to get the cheapest results and the slowest results at the same time. Very seldom is value the same thing as the time that you're investing or the money that you're investing as well, right? Cheap equals cheap for most times. Very rarely does something exceptional value, exceptional quality at the lowest price, right? We've been burned many times like that. So think about that. Even when we have the money to afford something, why aren't we purchasing it? We're not purchasing it unless we think we deserve it. Ouch. Ouch. Something inside us is telling us that we just don't deserve it. So when we feel that resistance, when you look at the price tags of things and you feel that resistance, it literally means you don't believe you're worthy of having it. Sit with that one for a moment. When you are looking at the price tags of things that you really want and you can't afford, and you're not making that decision, it literally means that you don't think. Something inside you is telling you that you don't deserve it or you're not worthy of having it. As soon as I learned that, it was like, oh my gosh. I didn't even want to admit that. I didn't want to feel that. No one wants to hear that. Some of you are squirming right now listening to this. It's making you uncomfortable. May even want to turn off this episode or go find something happier to listen to. But it's very important that you understand that all those examples that I shared with you, all those cases, all those dollar values, very specific things, because I know that you have them too. The specific values that you won't spend on a menu item, the specific thing you won't buy on a pair of shoes or a clothing or vacations or a car. These all exist because I've experienced these things. And now I've got that awareness, and now you've got that awareness. Anytime you feel that resistance, you got to start asking yourself a series of questions. So the first question I would ask you is, if you can afford it and you're not buying it, why are you working so hard? Why are you working so hard to afford things that you won't buy because there's something that keeps you from buying it? It doesn't make any sense, does it? Guys, we're all going to die. What are you going to do with that money? You can't take it with you. If you can afford something and you want something, why aren't you buying it? Again, it goes back to self-worth issues. It goes back to trying to justify. It goes back to these weird beliefs. So the next question then becomes, why do you believe you don't deserve something that you can afford? Why? Why do you believe that? And now you're thinking, well, dang, I don't know why I believe that. So the obvious question then becomes, well, where did you learn these beliefs from? Where did you learn from? I know that you got some answers. You didn't learn them by yourself. You weren't born programmed with these beliefs. Guys, we adopt our beliefs from the people that raise us, the people that we hang around, the people that taught us in schools, people that we work with, maybe even your spouse. Maybe your spouse showed up to the relationship with even more self-limiting beliefs than you have in certain areas of life. And you're having to adopt their belief systems because you don't want to have some kind of friction or resistance in your relationship. Rather than having these meaningful conversations, it's like, here's what I believe. I understand that you believe this. Like, let's work together to get past this limiting beliefs that's holding both of us back. So when you think about your parents and the things that they told you and the things that you took as gospel and you didn't challenge them or didn't doubt them because you didn't have a reason to at the time, that became your base programming. The people that you're hanging around with, they say things. You nod your head, you pick it up. Oh, hey man, those new Mustang GTs, whew, they sure are expensive. I wish I could get one of those. If you're hanging around with people like that and you're in the same socioeconomic financial level as them, you're probably learning that same belief, the same limiting belief that they have. So think about those kind of things. The people we surround ourselves with, really, we watch their behaviors. We watch their how they handle money, how they think strategically, or they lack thinking strategically, or they have self-limiting beliefs of themselves. And you kind of just sit there and you validate these excuses back and forth with each other. And then you end up with where you're at. So, final question I would ask is, how do you speak to yourself about yourself? That's a weird question, right? How do you speak to yourself, like your internal dialogue, like the voices in your mind? How do you speak to yourself about yourself? When you see something that you can afford and you know you could buy it, but you're talking yourself out of it, how do you speaking to yourself? Oh man, Tony, you haven't worked hard enough to get that. Tony, if you buy that, your mom's going to have a fit because she says that that's too expensive. Tony, your friends on Facebook, they're going to think you're showing off if you buy that. What are those things that you're saying to yourself? You ever keep note of those things? You haven't worked hard enough to do that. You've got some goals, Tony. You got it. Even though we know that we can afford that, we know that we've worked really hard to get where we're at, you don't deserve that because you haven't worked hard enough. Like, you need to keep working, and maybe we'll buy that. Maybe. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you might, right? So how are you speaking to yourself? Here's some common phrases that I definitely want to raise your awareness of, because you need to eliminate these things from your thought process. You need to eliminate yourself and create barriers around people that are saying these kind of things around you that you're adopting. So these are some common phrases that you should never say to yourself, never repeat, and never allow anyone to say around you without just kind of calling them on that. So very common one is, I'll never be able to afford that. Another common one would be seeing someone got something that they're proud of, they've accomplished something, and your internal dialogue, that voice in your head goes, must be nice. Must be nice to be able to buy that. Must be nice to have a Ferrari. Must be nice to have that big house. Must be nice to have all this vacation time. Like, there's a little envy there. It's a little jealousy. It's a negative. It's a toxic thought process that you shouldn't have in your mind, right? So get rid of that phrase for sure. If you're coming at it from that, that's definitely a fixed mindset. It's not a growth mindset. Because here's the thing about saying must be nice. If you say must be nice to somebody else's success, then you will never have that for yourself. Because if you're talking down or talking negatively about somebody else's achievement, then you're putting it out into the universe that you don't want that. Because if you're having a little of a negative reaction to it, why would you think that you're going to attract that into your lives? You literally cannot have something that you think negatively about, because you're going to do things and self-sabotage yourself to push that opportunity away for you to have that same experience in your life. So even the people you dislike, if they're doing things that they're getting the results that you would like to achieve someday, you kind of have to put that chip aside and that grudge aside and say, hey, you know what? Good for you. I think that's great that you got that. I'm going to figure out how to do that for myself. You know, and that first phrase, I'll never be able to afford that, that's a big one, because this is the most common one I hear. They'll see something like, I'll post a car, or somebody will post a fancy watch or house, and someone's like, I'll never be able to afford that. Think about what your brain does when you say a phrase like that. When you say, I'll never be able to afford that, you're basically turning your brain off. If you ever think of this, your brain is a supercomputer, a very powerful computer, and your brain, even at the animals levels, likes to really solve problems. Your brain is always trying to solve a problem. And when you tell it, I'll never be able to afford that, you basically have removed the goal. There's no goal now. You've already told your brain, hey, you can go back to sleep. We got no goals. We have no aspirations. We'll never be able to afford that. So I don't need you to try to solve that for me. I don't need you to try to figure this out for me. So thinking about, you're turning your brain off. You're giving yourself zero goals by saying that kind of stuff. The other phrase that I see people say is, especially when it goes to buying luxury items or vacations, the things we've been talking about this episode, is they'll say something like, I'll never be a millionaire. You're right. If you ever say that or think, I'll never be a millionaire, again, Why would you ever think that you could become one or potentially become one if you say that? Because then again, you're also turning your brain off. I'll never be a millionaire. So your brain goes, well, hey, looks like we're not ever want to make any money, so we don't have to worry about that problem solver. Hey, what's next on the menu for the 99-cent double cheeseburgers? You know, that's all we're limited to. We're already there. We're hitting all of our goals, right? So quit saying those phrases. Quit thinking those phrases. Quit hanging around people that say those kind of phrases, because they're just going to create belief systems for you that are limiting to you. So now that you're aware of these limiting beliefs, how do you release them and move forward? Let's get into the solutions of these things. So here's some tips on how to get past these limiting beliefs. First of all, you need to understand the reasons you don't feel worthy or you don't deserve something. Why do you feel that way? Just sit with that and understand it. It's like digging deep. Like, think about these thoughts, these beliefs as an onion, for example. We like to talk about the onion because there's different layers to an onion. You kind of keep peeling back. You cut a little bit away and you peel it back, and there's another layer underneath. There's all these layers, and eventually you get to the middle of it, right? So this belief that you're carrying, these limiting beliefs, is really just the surface of that onion. It's just the outer surface. It's the thing that's the easiest. That's the knee-jerk reaction. It's that resistance. Peel back a layer. Go, hey, where did I learn this? Oh, yeah, my grandfather used to say that. Oh, yeah, that's what it was. My parents used to say that. Oh, you know, that teacher that I really loved, she used to say that. Or maybe it's even a coach or a mentor, someone that you really admire. It's got to be someone that you love, that you trusted along the way. Or maybe it's the news. Maybe you're watching too much CNN or too much Fox, and they're telling you all this stuff, and you're believing the things that they tell you, and you adopt those things. It's your personal belief to create limitations, you know? Politics and religion can create their own limiting beliefs in some ways. Challenge everything. Why do I believe that? Why don't I think that I'm worthy? Did I screw people over? Did I have a bad past? Did I lie? Hey, guys, we all made mistakes. Every one of us. There's nobody that is listening to this that is free of ever making bad decisions or bad mistakes. So you have to get past those kind of things and realize, like, yeah, that's my past. But your past doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do today and what you do in the future. Whatever bad decisions we made in full accountability got us to where we're at today. And if you can accept that where I'm at today, whatever financial situation, whatever struggle, relationships, or all these different things that I'm today, if I can accept full accountability that everything in the past, the bad and good decisions led me to where I'm at today, then it should make you feel empowered that you can make decisions today to move forward to change your future, because you can. Whatever future you envision for yourself, the decisions you make today and every day after that will lead you to that result. It's inevitable, because when you start to act and think like the person that you would like to become, you will start to make better decisions today and tomorrow that will lead you to that end result. So if you're not feeling worthy because of your past or things that you regret, take this time to just let it go. Let it go. It doesn't serve you anymore. It really doesn't serve you. The fact that you're listening to the show shows me that you're trying to move forward. You're trying to make improvements in your life. Forgive yourself. Have some grace for yourself. Just let it go. Make a commitment today that you're going to be moving forward. So now that you have determined where you learn these beliefs from, ask yourself, think about those people. I want you to think about the people here. So if you learned it from your mom, your dad, your teachers, friends, I want you to visualize those people in the perspective of they were at the time that you learned those things. So if you learned this from a childhood, think about your parents. If you learned it from your parents when you were 12, 13, 14 years old, what was their situation in life back then? Here's a really mind-blowing thing that most of us lack awareness of. Most of our parents were in their 20s. My parents were in their early 20s when they had me and my sister. You know, they were still trying to figure out life. 22, 23 years old. I mean, you think about that. We always see our parents as someone has experience because they're older and they're parents and are authority figures and they tell us what to do. And we wrongly assume that they have life figured out. Guys, did you have life figured out when you were in your 20s? Did you even have life figured out in your 30s? So think about what we were learning from the perspective of our parents and our teachers back when they were in an earlier time in their life. They were struggling too. They were trying to figure things out. They were trying to make the ends meet. They were trying to understand life and try to do the best they can as parents. But we were learning from people that had their own limiting beliefs that they learned from their parents. And it's just this generational thing. It's almost a curse, isn't it? Keeps people stuck where they're at. So when you look at the people that you learn from the perspective of the era, the time that you learned it from them, would you want that lifestyle that they had? Think about this. Like today you have, whatever you have, would you want that lifestyle, or would you trade places with them in that era? And if the answer is yes, then like, hey, maybe it was good advice that they're giving you, right? Maybe if you have very successful parents and they gave you solid advice in your childhood and you built a belief system around that, you're better off. You're absolutely better off. But if you look back and go, man, they were really struggling. Or, man, my mom and dad, they just had really low risk tolerance. I have a much higher risk tolerance. I can take higher risks and I'm okay doing that. Compare where you are to the people giving you advice and go, hey, would I trade places? And if not, you need to start just questioning all these beliefs that you carry. And do they serve you? Are they going to get you the result that you want for your life? And so that perspective shift, understanding where they were in life and how they taught you, is going to help you realize, like, man, I need to forgive some of them. They didn't have all the answers. They were doing the best they could. I took it as gospel because I love and I trusted them, but it doesn't serve me. So I need to make some better decisions. I need to raise my awareness today and make better decisions going forward to get what I would like to have for my life. Next thing I would say to get past these limiting beliefs is stop hanging around with people with similar beliefs. Simple. When we hear the phrase of you become the average of the 5 people you hang around, there's a lot of truth to that. When I was doing stupid things as a kid and I got in trouble, it was because of the friends I was hanging around with. When I was stuck in corporate and chasing some imaginary carrot to get to the top, I was hanging around with people that really focused on that. And then entrepreneurship, I started getting into that, and I was hanging around with people that are like, oh, that looks really scary. I don't know if you should do that. And their risk tolerance was lower than mine, and they weren't willing to gamble or bet on themselves like I had always done up until that point. And then you start hanging around people that are making more than you, and they're thinking and they're making better moves and they're thinking further ahead, and they're starting to operate differently, and they start to have different perspectives about money and growing income and influence and authority and relationships. And you start to getting advice from people that are further ahead of you, your mentors in life. So stop hanging around with people with similar beliefs, the must be nice guys and that kind of stuff. Just create boundaries. You don't have to delete them from your lives, but you need to definitely create some boundaries by not hanging out with them. Start surrounding yourself with people, even online, if possible, to get around people that think differently, that will challenge your beliefs and call you out on things and say, like, man, why do you limit yourself to that kind of stuff? Why do you believe that? They're going to help you raise awareness. And you're like, oh, shit, that's true. Like, I do believe this. And thank you for calling me out on this. I need to work on that. I need to think a little bit bigger. Yeah, you do. We all do. Even I do. Again, this is not something we always outgrow. We gain awareness. We realize, like, oh, there's a series of questions of why I believe this and why I think that I'm not worthy of more. And then you move forward. So next thing I would say is to improve your self-confidence. I know it sounds very easy, and it kind of is. Again, if I told you to forgive your past, give yourself some grace, you need to improve your self-confidence. The easiest way to do that is just keep promises to yourself. So if you, for example, want to go on a fitness journey, I want to lose that 30 pounds, I'm going to look good, I'm tired of being overweight, and I'm tired of having low energy, I'm tired of huffing and puffing when I just take up a flight of stairs, like it's embarrassing, I get these sweats, like I had all this. I'm speaking from experience. That was me in my mid-30s. I just had to focus on keeping promises to myself. So if I promise to myself, I'm going to join a gym, And I'm going to go at least 3 days a week. That's how I started, at least 3 days a week. I'm not going to make any excuses. And I'm going to go very specifically. I'm going to go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Very specific goals. And if it was Wednesday and I said, I know today I'm supposed to go to the gym, but I don't really feel like it, I'll go tomorrow. Guys, that go later, do it later is usually the code word for never. If you say I'll do it later, that usually means never, right? We can all agree on that. So hold yourself accountable. Keep promises to yourself. Unless you are deathly ill or incapable physically or mentally of going to do things to keep your promises, you need to go. And you build confidence by doing things that you don't always feel like doing. You don't have to feel like going to the gym. You don't have to feel like completing that course that you spent thousands of dollars on and you don't show up and you're not really actually doing the action or the work. You should be looking at things on a long-term perspective and saying, hey, I don't feel like doing it, but I know that's going to deliver a significant result later in my life if I just focus on improving myself in this way, that it's going to create momentum. And it's soon enough, by going to the gym and eating healthier, you're going to create a new identity for yourself. Your identity may identify as like, I've always been an overweight, dude. I've always been a big woman. Like, you may have that identity right now. But the thing is that you're going to create a new identity with new habits. So if you commit to going to the gym 3 days a week, and eventually that becomes 4 days a week, and then 5 days a week, and then 6 days. I never want to say 7 days a week because I don't strive for perfection. But most of the time, I do go 7 days a week to exercise. But I'll say I'll go 6 because I don't want to strive for perfection. Because a lot of times when you strive for perfection and you let yourself down, that's when people, like, the house of cards kind of falls down. Like, I told myself I was going to go 7 days a week and I didn't go yesterday. So you know what? I'm just going to take the month off. Guys, what do you think's worse? Just saying you're going to go 6 days a week and considering the seventh day a bonus as a reward, or having yourself set up for failure where you're like, if I don't do it, I'm just going to take out, I'll just start next Monday again. I'll get back on it. Like I mentioned in another episode with 75 Hard, Andy Frisella's mindset and fitness program. 75 days, you got to do this workout routine. You can go look that up. But I can't tell you how many times I'll see people on my social media feeds that have failed that. They'll be like day 30 or something, and something will happen, or I forgot to take a selfie photo, I didn't drink my water, like whatever reason. And instead of starting the very next day, they make some lame excuse and like, I'll try again next month. You see, that's the kind of mentality, that's the loser mindset that we don't want to have. If you fail something on day 30, I don't care if you failed on day 74. If your mindset is the proper mindset, you'll just pick it up the next day and start over. You won't have a day off, because that whole taking a day off, a week off, a month off, a quarter off is exactly why you are stuck where you're at today. That's the result that you keep getting, is because you're not seeing the value in yourself long term and the significant value that you're going to create and the opportunities you're going to create for yourself by being healthier and have a stronger mindset. So if you fail, a lot of our success is measured on how fast we get back up and keep going. We don't want to take time off and go, I tried. And, you show up at a event a month later and your friends are like, bro, I thought you were doing 75 hard. You look like you gained weight. What's going on? Like, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to have that identity of a low performer and a failure and a quitter. Like, I don't ever want to be a quitter. Like, if I fail, okay, time extended. Let's go. Let's get back on it. So improve your self-confidence by keeping promises to yourself and delivering on the actions, even if you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. And when you do that, you're going to build self-confidence because you're building results and you're building trust in yourself. And once you've established trust in yourself and doing the things that you say you're going to do and finishing the things that you start, now you can start to spill over and keep those equally big promises to other people. I'm not saying to overcommit to other people, but when you promise you're going to be somewhere, you promise you're going to show up, you promise you're going to do something, you promise you're going to deliver something for your client, do it. And now you've got a big dose of compounding of keeping promises and actions to yourself. you will become far more confident. So if you're struggling with confidence right now, go create some things and opportunities to start stacking wins over time, and you will have confidence. So the next thing I would say to help you get past these limiting beliefs would be to set concrete, measurable goals. Like I just talked about the fitness thing. Like, I'm going to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm going to go this time. Like, be very specific, because if you leave really vague goals and measurable things, you're not going to do them, because you're going to look for ways to talk yourself out of things. You're going to find ways to bargain with yourself and go, oh, well, I set this goal and it doesn't really have anything specific, so I'll just do it tomorrow, right? Like, no, quit doing that kind of stuff. And so going back to the purchases, the segment we're talking about, I don't want you to consider these purchases as goals. You know, buying a Rolex is not a goal. Buying a Ferrari is not a goal. Buying a Mustang GT is not a goal. These are milestones. Like, think about this as your lifetime journey. You're traveling down the highway and you see these mile markers, right? You see these signs showing you exits, which are distractions, but you're seeing these mile markers. And sometimes you come to a rest stop and you're like, cool, like, let's get out and stretch. Like let's, get recharged, get back in the seat and get driving. But I want you to see these goals that you're creating as mile markers are almost like rest stops, It's like, put it in more visual perspective. Like, how many times have you been out in the middle of nowhere on a road trip and you're like, man, I really need to go to the bathroom, and you're not seeing anything. You're like, oh, and then it's like next gas station is an hour away. Like, oh man, I got to be able to hold this. Like, I'm going to drive a little faster. Use that same analogy for your success in life. If you got to hold on to something and be like, man, I'm just going to struggle. I'm going to just do it. Like, I got to do it. You're not going to go piss your drawers. You're not going to poop your pants driving, are you? You're going to hold it. And so think about that as your success highway, your journey. Sometimes you got to hold it. Sometimes you got to keep going and you got to drive a little faster and, hopefully you get there in time. But then there's that reward. You're like, oh man, thank you. I just needed that. Whew, yeah, good stuff, right? But then I need to get back on the road and keep moving. So don't think of these end purchases as the final destination, but just milestones and rewards along your journey. If you start thinking of them like that, then you're not going to spend a lot of time focusing on that. If I get this, I'm going to be happy. No, get that, but keep going. You'll probably find something cooler along the way, right? That's how it happens. Just change your shifting of your mind. Like, with cars, like, I didn't spend $100,000 on a car until I had $1 million in the bank. And when I tell people that, they're like, well, everything's expensive now. And, I don't think you should have to be a millionaire to buy 100,000. Yeah, you should. If that makes financial sense, because if I'm spending 10% of my money to go buy a fancy car, that's justifiable. I can afford that. It was the same way when I was buying $25,000 cars. I had $250,000 in the bank, right? It's kind of a ratio. If you're spending more than 50% of your income or your savings on a car, it's not really a great idea, is it? You need to figure out how to increase your earning potential to be able to go reward yourself that way. Nowadays, I don't have a car in our driveway or in our shop that's less than $100,000. I've built cars that are $250,000, $300,000 nowadays. So your perspectives will always increase, but you shouldn't get stupid and buy things like that. So that journey, the milestone, the markers, the rewards, the things that you buy along the way, to understand that there's always better. And it ain't because you want to be happy, it's because you're improving, you're increasing your earning potential. Like, you're going to get those rewards. The next thing I would say to get past these limiting mindsets is quit saying the stupid phrases that I talked about. The how can I afford that? Or how will it's instead of saying I can't afford that, I want you to challenge yourself to use a better phrase. A better phrase is how will I afford that? You see that shift there? Versus I can't afford that, or I'll never be able to afford that. Those turn off your brain. Those kill your goals. When you start saying it in a more positive way, a constructive way of how will I afford that, words matter, because you're saying to your brain, I will afford that. So now you've engaged your brain. See, there's a shift here. Your brain is like, hey, I like this goal. I like that milestone, that mile marker reward that you're putting in my brain, Hal. Let me get to work and try to figure out opportunities. And when your brain is engaged and it's always looking for these opportunities because you've given it an actual goal, it's always going to be scanning the horizon looking for that pathway that's going to lead you to potentially gaining that result. And it's very important that you set those goals and you set those measurable goals that are very specific, because you have to allow your brain to work in the background, because we have subconscious brain activity that is always looking for things. And it may be that person that you meet at the next function. It may be this podcast. It might be buying that book. It might be someone making a deal, or it could be a new client that says something that sparks that opportunity that if your brain was turned off, it would have not heard it. It would have not seen it. It wouldn't have even observed that opportunity. But since you fed it with a goal, now your brain's always engaged in the background. It's working in subconscious, and somebody says something or you see something, it's going to be like, hey, Tony, that's the opportunity. That's a clue that's going to move us closer to the goal. You got to go do that. You got to go meet that person. You got to go invest in that. You need to make this deal. It's always looking for the opportunity, because it is a problem solver. It is a powerful supercomputer that if you give it end results to work on, it will deliver those results in unexpected ways many times. But if your brain is turned off, you will never see or hear those opportunities. That's why it's so important to use very specific words. How will I afford that? Instead of saying, I can't afford that. The next way to get past these limiting beliefs is just invest heavily into new skills and knowledge that increase your earning potential. I don't like when I see people complaining about their job or their financial situation, but they're not really doing anything about it. They're just complaining. Complaining's free. Oh, well, I'm too old to go do this. I'm too old to do that. No, that's just an excuse. You can go Google this yourself and look up multi-millionaires and what age did they start their companies. And you'll find that a lot of them start in their 40s, 50s, 60s, even their 70s, because they finally had enough of making excuses. And so they went and invested heavily into new skills and new knowledge to create something new for their lives. You know, I can't tell you how many times I'll do a coaching introduction call, like just to see if I'm a good fit with a client. And we'll get to the price point. And I could just see that they have these limiting beliefs. We'll talk about price, and I'll say, oh man, I just don't think I can afford this. I can't afford a coach right now, but yeah, I appreciate your time, Tony. Like, let me get back to you. Let me think about it. Let me get back to you. And I already knew when they say something like that, that's the code word for later, which means never most of the time. I would say maybe 1 out of 50 of those type of people would actually come back and follow up and go, you know what, I'm ready to move forward. Let's do this. And so I'll be watching these people on social media that say that they can't afford something, and they're just buying stupid shit, and they're spending money on things that really aren't moving the needle for their lives. You know, when you say something like, I can't afford to invest in my own skills, I can't afford to invest in my own knowledge to increase my earning potential, I can't afford that. But then they'll go buy a side-by-side and they'll lift it and they'll put big fancy wheels on it, or they'll go buy a third car to go race at the track, or you know, they'll go to these events and they'll spend $10,000 just to get a selfie with some influencer in one day. And it's like, you're not really doing anything like you say you want to. You want to increase your earning potential. You want to earn more money. You want to be able to afford the lifestyle, but you're blowing it on stupid stuff that's not moving the needle. And you say that you can't afford it. So to me, I would say until you become a millionaire, you should be really focused on investing in yourself heavily. Because if we learn new skills and new knowledge and gaining access to new networks, that's where all the opportunity is. If you're not happy with your career, regardless of your age, regardless of your financial situation, if you truly want it, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. I don't like excuses. I was working 3 jobs to put myself through college. I didn't want to do that. I sure as hell didn't like to do that, but it was the only way I had to do that. And so when we want something, we become really resourceful, don't we? We figure it out. So understand that you need to invest heavily in yourself if you want to get past these things, to get past these limiting beliefs that we carry to increase your earning potential. So finally, I'd say that the final thing that you need to really work on to get past these limiting beliefs is visualization. Go touch your dreams. You know, if you want something, if you want to live in a 5,000 square foot home on property, go look at some homes. There's homes for sale in your area. You may not be able to afford them right now, but you know what? Nobody has to know that. You can go look at the house. Contact the listing agent, say, hey, I'd like to schedule an appointment to go just look at this house, and just look at it just like a buyer. Act like you are the buyer. And look at it and go, well, I'll get back with you if we're interested. Thank you for showing it to us. Now, somebody would be like, well, I'm wasting their time. But you know what? Is your dream worth it? Yes. If you want an exotic car, go to an exotic car dealership. Look at those cars. Spend some time studying those cars. If the salespeople are nice enough, you may even sit in the car. And the more that you contact and touch your dreams, the stronger your visualization will be that you would like to achieve those kind of things, these milestones, these rewards along your journey. That's the way I think about these things. Guys, I can't tell you how many times in my life where I've visualized things and I experienced things, and then my brain worked in mysterious ways to look for those opportunities in life and delivered the actual result, which became my reality. It's happened numerous times in my life. I'll share you with one right now, since we're on the subject of cars earlier. Let me tell you the story about the first Dodge Viper that I bought. It's a blue and white 2000 Dodge Viper. Bought it in 2007, and I couldn't afford it until then. But let me back you all the way back to 1995. At that time, I was still in college. I was working those 3 jobs. Couldn't afford a Dodge Viper. Back then, it might as well have been $100,000. I was waiting tables, working as a welder, and there's no way I could have afforded a Dodge Viper at that time. But you know what? I'm the car guy. And I remember them debuting this concept Dodge Viper. It was blue with white stripes. And I remember seeing this in the magazines, and I was a Chevy guy. I'm still not really a big Dodge guy. I just love Dodge Vipers and my TRX. So I was like, man, that's a beautiful car. It looks like an old Shelby Daytona race car from the 60s. It's like, that is awesome. Like, I'd love to have one of those one of these days. I never said, I can't afford that and put it away. I said, I'd love to have one of these days. And so I literally took the article out of the magazine and I stuck it on a thumbtack above my desk where I studied every night. And anytime I was struggling with school and making up excuses and not wanting to push myself, I would look up on this cork board that was above my desk, and I would see things that I thumbtacked on there, which is essentially a vision board, something that I learned from my mom for my entire life. And it would be a quick reminder of, like, these are the things that I'm working for that I'm going to experience someday in my life, that if I just focus on this kind of stuff, yeah, I can't afford it now. And yeah, it sucks right now, but it will happen. I think it's going to happen. If I could just follow the path that I know that's going to get there, because it will, I'll eventually have that. And so I would get back to studying. So fast forward, now it's 2005, 2006, and they quit making the blue and white GTS back in 97. So I was like, oh, I guess I missed an opportunity. And I never really thought about it again, but I knew that it would be cool to have one. Maybe I'll buy a used one at some point. And at the time I was writing and shooting for an automotive magazine, and the editor calls me up and he's like, hey, there's this twin turbo Pontiac Trans Am in Houston where you live, and we want to put it on the cover. But we got this idea. We want it on the cover with an exotic car from a rolling shot next to it. It's like, do you know anybody with an exotic car that we can put next to it? Because we want to make it like this Trans Am is like the world beater, and it's taking down all these exotic cars. I was like, man, I don't know too many exotic car owners, because I really didn't in 2005. I was driving a Corvette base model C6 at the time. And I remember just reaching out to the owner of the Trans Am to try to coordinate the photo shoot. And I asked him, like, do you know anybody with an exotic car that we can put on the cover with you and do a rolling shot? And he said, yeah, actually, one of my friends just got the brand new Dodge Viper that just came out. It's the hard top, just came out. He only had it a few weeks. It's like, oh, wow. I was like, that'd be awesome. Like, brand new Viper, like, one, it's a new model. It's a hard top. It's 2006. And so we scheduled it, and it was on a Saturday. And the Saturday it shows up, the car shows up, the 2 guys show up, and it's a blue Viper with stripes. I was like, oh my God, that's the new version of that old one that I was always fantasizing about back when I was in college. And they make these again? It wasn't even on my radar that these things came back out because I was still focused on Trans Ams and Corvettes at that time. And so I spent that entire day sitting in that Viper and looking at it and shooting photos of it, hundreds and hundreds of photos, and it eventually did make a cover shot, really cool shot with both those cars. And I was like, man, that's cool. And I just remember thinking to myself in 2006, I'm going to have one of these. Like, I want one of these cars. Like, this is really cool. But I wasn't ready to spend $100,000 on a car at that time. And I didn't tell myself I can't afford it. I said, how will I afford this? Like, this, I want one of these. Like, this is really an awesome car. And so the next year, 2007, about midway through the year, I had a private equity company reach out, interest in buying my website, ls1tech.com. And we sold that company for millions in 2007, late 2007. And I was able to go write a check for $97,000 plus taxes for a new Dodge Viper, blue with white stripes, which I still own today. And I didn't understand how it was going to happen. My company was never listed for sale. You see how when you create visualization and you keep your opportunities in your mind that these are the things I'm going to achieve, your brain works in the background and opportunities do present themselves in some time, in some fashion, but whether that's through somebody you know or an opportunity like that, and it becomes the result of what you would like to achieve. So when you do that, you end up with the result and you end up with the car, and that's the story of that. So what are you thinking about in your life? What would you like to achieve? And how would you like to get that for yourself? Well, go spend some time and touch those dreams. Visualize those things. Quit telling yourself that you can't afford things. Go experience those things. Because here's the thing. You deserve it. You're worthy. You will achieve whatever you focus on. And I hope this episode's been really helpful for you. So if you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you shared it. If you've got friends or family that need to hear this, if you had some aha moments or takeaways, share this episode with them. I'd greatly appreciate it. You know, these shows don't grow because we're spending advertising. They grow because of word of mouth. And after 5 years and hopefully dozens and dozens and hundreds of episodes, if these shows are impacting you, I'd appreciate it if you shared those things. Thank you for spending this solo episode with me. It's been great. I hope you raised awareness on these limiting beliefs and where they came from and how to get past them. Have a great day. Thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.